The UFC are in Perth this weekend, and boys, this card is a banger. This main event is a banger. I cannot wait to talk to you about Carlos Prates versus Jack Della Maddalena. But we're not stopping there. In this video, I'm going to go through the entire fight card with you, giving you my full card predictions, betting analysis, and breakdowns for every single fight on the card. As I mentioned, this week we are in Perth, Western Australia, where Jack Della Maddalena is taking on Carlos Prates in an absolute banger and the co-main event of the evening. We have Beneil Dariush, and some would say being fed to Quillan Salkilld. We got the Bulk and Bear Brando Peričić coming on, taking on Shamil Gaziev. Big step up in competition. You know who we're rooting for in that one. And some of these other fights are sleeper fights, boys. I can't wait to go through every single one with you. So without further ado, run the intro and I'll see you on the other side. What's going on, boys? Welcome back to the show. I got a little extra pep in my step this weekend because we're speaking about Carlos Prates versus Jack Della Maddalena. In my opinion, the best fight the UFC has made this year. Yes, it's better than Charles Oliveira versus Max Holloway, in my opinion. I mean, this is a striker's delight. We will have no 5-round grappling takedown affair. We will have no laying on top of your opponent and winning via decision. Charles is a beast, no shame to him, but Jack Della Maddalena and Carlos Prates are going to go to war in the middle of the octagon, something that we all hope for in the Charles versus Max fight. We're gonna get that in this fight with two arguably higher level strikers than those guys as well. So boys, I can't wait for that one. And I'm not gonna lie, like, that fight is holding up the card to some degree. I'm not gonna say the rest of the card is absolute electric, but there are some very fun fights on the card. I mean, Beneil Dariush is always a fun watch, in my opinion. The guy either gets knocked out or showcases elite level MMA that you will rarely see anyone else showcase. You know, very good striking, grappling, great jiu-jitsu, just all-round, a well-rounded fighter, you know. Quillan Salkilld, he's become electric. You know, this guy was a takedown machine, decision machine to some degree. I thought he may turn out to be that, and that's how he entered the UFC with the fights against Gage Young and Yanel Ashmouz. But, you know, he's gone on a very, very long highlight streak now. I won't say long, but at least multiple finishes in the UFC now, right? So, yeah, I think that's a great fight. Down the card, we have Brando, the Bulk and Bear. I mean, anytime Brando fights, you know you're in for a good fight. Shamil Gaziev is no joke either, you know. He is a legitimate heavyweight contender. You know, he's a top 10 fighter easily. So yes, it's not the best card of all time, but boys, I'm super excited for this one, man. So smash the like button, hit the subscribe button if you want to see me on your YouTube channel weekly, giving you my bet and breakdown and predictions for every single fight on the card. But without further ado, no more mucking around. Let's get into the main event of the evening. And it is Jack Della Maddalena taking on Carlos Prates. Della Maddalena coming into this fight with a record of 18 wins, 3 losses. Carlos Prates, on the other hand, 23 wins, 7 losses. Currently, the bookies have this fight lined a good old-fashioned pick'em, -110 apiece. They cannot decide who the winner will be. So yeah, boys, what a fantastic fight. You know, first thing that stands out to me about this fight is just the level of striking we're going to see in the octagon. The level of MMA striking we're going to see is going to be fantastic. And not only that, the two strikers have completely different striking styles, you know, so that's going to gel for a very exciting matchup. Somebody's probably getting knocked out. If somebody doesn't get knocked out, it's very likely someone's getting dropped, hurt, or wobbled. I'd be very surprised to see no fighter hurt or wobbled in this fight. And if it does go to decision, which is unlikely, the odds aren't out for the fight doesn't go to decision prop, but I assume it's going to be pretty juiced and quite high. If the fight does go to a decision, though, it's going to be an all-out war, probably a banger. Fighters have been dropped, bloodied up, hurt, broken orbitals. Like, it's going to be a crazy fight. So I can't wait for it. I feel a little bit sick in the head. I'm being so excited about potential broken orbitals, but you're a bit sick in the head as well with me. We both love that. So it is what it is. The second thing that stands out to me in this one, boys, is honestly that the fight is lined -110 apiece, right? That means the bookmakers and the betting market, who are quite smart, of these people, you know, the betting market and the bookmakers, for the most part, they're decently smart, and they cannot pick a winner in this one. They're basically saying it's 50-50 apiece. Who the hell knows? Anyone could win. We don't know. So that's interesting, right? It tells you that it's a very closely lined fight. It tells you that it's a very close fight in general. You know, I don't think you can dismiss any fighter's chance of winning this one. You can still have a strong opinion on the fight. And I have a fairly strong one, and we will get into that, and I'll tell you it in just a minute. But even having a strong opinion on the fight, I don't think you can dismiss the other fighter's opinion. I think it's just, or the other fighter's chance of winning the fight. I think it's one of those fights where you understand that even if you're betting one side, the other fighter could potentially win it. You know, it is a close fight, a great welterweight matchup, two of the best in the division, in one of the best divisions, if not the best division in MMA today. There's honestly many things to say about this fight, and I could break down this fight in a multitude of ways. I'll try and keep it as succinct as possible while giving you the most important information. So if we go back and look at Carlos Prates' career, we want to mainly focus on fights where he has fought primarily boxers, right? Because that's what Jack Della Maddalena does. And something that I always do when I'm studying for these fights is go and see how fighters performed against similar stylistic matchups than they have on the upcoming weekend, right? That they have on the upcoming weekend. So Prates has fought two primary boxers before, and that is in Geoff Neal and in Trevin Giles. And to be honest, he didn't perform great in those two fights. And outside of the fight with Ian Gary, I would say that Trevin Giles and Geoff Neal troubled him the most. He still dispatched of those two fighters fairly easily, one in round one, one in round two, but they tagged him up. They landed their boxing shots. And I do think that Carlos Prates to some degree is susceptible to a really good boxer, is susceptible to be getting hit by a really good boxer. And that's exactly what Jack Della Maddalena does, The other susceptibility that Carlos Prates obviously has is to the game plan that Ian Gary employed, which is you don't stand in front of him like a Muay Thai striker, you don't trade with him, you don't box with him, and in fact you skirt the outside of the octagon, you have elite footwork like an Ian Gary, like a Michael Venom Page, you're faster than him to some degree, you win the jab war, you stick and move, you mix in takedowns at the perfect time, and you fight an elite fight IQ game plan just like Ian Gary did in that fight, and you still might get knocked out just like Ian Gary did in that fight. Carlos Prates displayed elite cardio in that fight. He's proven to have 5-round cardio, just like Jack Della Maddalena has, in my opinion. So it's a great fight. When we go back to the earlier fights I referenced, Trevin Giles and Geoff Neal, although Geoff Neal and Trevin Giles were having some success in the boxing in round one, it just seemed to me that the reads of Carlos Prates was starting to become more prevalent. He was starting to download data as he does. He was starting to set traps that were working a lot more than earlier in the rounds. And it was just a matter of time before he would land that kill shot. He's knocked out every single opponent he's beat in the UFC. And I don't think it was any surprise or coincidence that he also knocked out Trevin Giles and Geoff Neal as soon as he got his reads going. I'd say the Geoff Neal performance was actually even more impressive to me. It was against a better fighter, first of all. And towards the end of that first round, if you go back and watch that fight, you're going to see exactly what I mean. Carlos Prates really starts to get a read and a beat on Geoff Neal and starts to open up a lot more. He starts to smile. He starts to almost dance in there. He's circling off the cage extremely well. His in and out movement is elite. He's like floating in there. Geoff Neal is still landing some shots, but he's having a hard time getting to Carlos Prates, whereas Carlos Prates is throwing these knees that don't quite land, but they're very close, landing some big calf kicks, very close on some of his boxing combinations, landing to the body. And at the end of that fight, at the end of the round, he lands a brutal spinning back elbow, which renders Geoff Neal unconscious. I was lucky enough to watch that one live, and it was absolutely crazy to watch live, especially with a bet on Carlos Prates. We absolutely erupted, and the whole of Chicago erupted as well. And I'm yet to find a fight or watch a fight of Carlos Prates where he doesn't eventually get reads on his opponent. Even in his lone loss in the UFC against Ian Gary, he was able to find that kill shot. He carries his power extremely late. Looking at him, you wouldn't think he had that kill switch, but he definitely does. And I think that Jack Della Maddalena is in grave danger in all 5 rounds, however long it goes, from getting hurt with a big shot. Jack Della Maddalena, on the other hand, he has a lot of danger in his fists as well. He has hurt many fighters. He's definitely got, I don't think he's got as much power as Carlos Prates, but he has hurt many fighters. I have seen Carlos Prates tagged up by boxers before, as I mentioned. It would not surprise me to see Jack Della Maddalena landing some big shots here. I do tend to think, though, that he has to come through a bit of an early storm. Now, I guess what I mean by that is a middle round storm. I could see Jack Della Maddalena starting well here, and even winning round one, because Carlos does download data. Jack does too. High-level fighters often do that. Sometimes they take a round off, or, they take some time to get going. And Jack and Carlos kind of have a similar style in that degree. Sometimes you'll see Jack not go into his heavy boxing combinations early. He'll take some time to start to unload and start to land head-body combinations, as he does some of the best head-body combinations in the entire division. So I wouldn't be surprised if like either fighter won round 1 because the other fighter's kind of taken some time off. I think in the middle rounds, round 2 and round 3, I think Carlos Prates is going to start to get a read on Jack Della Maddalena. I think with his diverse skill set, you know, we have to remember Carlos Prates has a much more diverse skill set in the striking than Jack Della Maddalena. And even in the grappling in general, I think Carlos Prates has more skills for MMA. I genuinely believe that. You know, we can get into that a little bit in a minute, maybe not. But going back to my point, I think that Carlos Prates' diverse skill set and his high-level fight IQ and striking reads will allow him to start to land the more meaningful shots in round 2 and round 3. I don't know what's going to happen in round 1. Carlos could land a knockout in round 1, of course. He's got round 1 knockouts before. He could definitely do it again. I'm not too confident on the round 1 picture. I lean Carlos, but I'm not too confident. Round 2 and round 3 is really where I think Carlos is going to start to get his reads. I think Carlos gets reads faster than Jack Della Maddalena in the striking, in my opinion. They're both very good at it, but I think Carlos does it faster. Sometimes he does it middle, end of round 1, round 2. He's not really going to the later rounds, like end of round 2, round 3 to get these reads. I've seen that more from Jack, where he starts to get his reads a little bit later in the fight. He's done that in multiple fights now. You know, he did it against Angelusa, even in his UFC debut on the Contender Series. You know, so it goes back to when he first came in the UFC. I think he's just that type of fighter. I think in a Kevin Holland fight, he was starting to land a little bit more in the later rounds than he was early. You know, he took some time to get a read on Kevin Holland's style. So I think round 2 and round 3 is, and even round 1 maybe, is going to be some good rounds for Carlos Prates. If he doesn't get Jack out of there, I could see Jack coming back in round 4 and round 5, because Jack's very durable, very good cardio, will to win, good belief in himself, and elite at making reads himself. You know, so I could see him coming back into the fight, landing some big body shots that start to take their toll in rounds 3, 4, and 5, and that's where Jack pours it on, you know. So I think it could be a tale of two fights. If Carlos doesn't get him out, I could see Jack pouring it on. But I also could see Jack pouring it on for a round or 2 and then Carlos still landing a kill shot. You know, I struggle to see Jack knocking out Carlos, although obviously it could happen. I just think Carlos has way more tools to knock Jack out. You know, and I think that's really why I lean Carlos as a more of a knockout artist. I also feel like he's just proven it more as well. Like, he's proven that he can knock you out with head kicks, flying knees. Knees are his biggest weapon in his entire arsenal. I actually did a video on Carlos Prates. You can type in Lucrative MMA Carlos Prates, Lucrative James Carlos Prates. It's called The Many Tools of Carlos Prates. And I literally went through all of the tools that he has in his arsenal in the striking. I've seen him knock people out with elbows, knees to the body, punches to the body, headshots, head kicks. I just haven't seen that diversity from Jack Della Maddalena, you know. So I trust Carlos over the course of 5 rounds to use his diverse arsenal better than Jack can use his one arsenal, which is very good, but it is boxing. You know, look, Jack's got a decent head kick. You know, I see him hit Angelusa with a good head kick. And look, he does have decent striking and kicks and stuff like that. Good teeps to the body, good knees as well. He knocked out Gilbert Burns to some degree with a knee, even though he finished it off with punches. So yes, he has a diverse skill set as well. Nowhere near the level of Carlos, in my opinion. And in my opinion, that's going to be the difference of the fight, boys. A little disclaimer. I am a bit biased towards Carlos Prates. I met him. I know him. I met his team. They were very nice. We hung out an entire evening after that knockout in Chicago. I've mentioned it many times before. If you follow this channel, you will know that. And you will also know that I always give you guys disclaimers if I have one. We have one later on in the card as well. Brando Peričić, the Balkan Bear, is a friend of mine. I'm going to throw that disclaimer out there then as well, that I may be a little bit biased. Even if I say I'm not going to be, I'm a human, I'm a loyal person. And so maybe even if I'm trying not to be, there's going to be some level of bias there. I personally feel like I'm not being biased and that, you know, Carlos is the objective pick for me here based on everything I said. But I just want to give you a disclaimer, boys, because it doesn't hurt to have that disclaimer, you know? Just more information for you to work with. And that's my goal here, boys, is to give you as much information as possible. So let me give you a little bit more before I give you my ultimate prediction and before we get on to the next fight, the co-main event. So I want to throw up a couple of video clips here. So I went and I did my narrative research and my outside of the octagon research, as I always do. And I found a couple of training pieces of Jack Della Maddalena on Instagram of him wrestling and grappling extremely heavy. You know, he's shooting takedowns, as you can see here. He's grappling people, ground and pound, throwing arm bars into the mix there. And so does that mean that he's going to go out there with a sort of grappling game plan against Carlos? No, I don't think so. Does it mean that he may mix it in? Yes, I think it's definitely possible that Jack shoots 1 or 2 takedowns in this fight. You might be surprised to know this, but Jack Della Maddalena actually shot a takedown on Islam Makhachev, Belal Muhammad, and Gilbert Burns. So this guy shoots takedowns against anybody. Why is he not going to shoot takedowns against Carlos Prates? I personally think he actually will. Do I think he's going to go to a heavy grappling game plan? Definitely not. Do I think he's going to try and mix it in every now and then? Yeah, so it's going to be interesting to see that. Interestingly enough, during my research, I saw the opposite for Carlos Prates, and I saw him posting takedown defense and grappling defense pictures on his Instagram. So I don't know what Instagram tells the true story. Is Jack going to be able to get grappling success, or will Carlos's Instagram prove the true of the two on him actually defending the takedowns? The interesting thing on my side, though, is I think Carlos Prates has better jiu-jitsu than Jack Della Maddalena. I know a lot of you know Carlos as a striker. He's got Muay Thai tattooed across his chest. He is a striker. But what he also is, I mean, to me, Carlos showed some very good jiu-jitsu against Ian Gary, although at times he stayed on his back for too long, including the Leon Edwards fight where Leon took his back and controlled him. But I actually feel like he's got better jiu-jitsu than Jack Della Maddalena. You know, he's proved it for longer. He is from Brazil. That is a jiu-jitsu country. As we know, Brazilian jiu-jitsu is literally the sport's name. There's actually some fights of Carlos Prates before he got into the UFC, even in his losses, where he's showing pretty good jiu-jitsu. And this is back in 2019, you know, so you're talking like 7 years ago. He's showing good jiu-jitsu. So I think he's higher level than Jack. So even if Jack takes him down, I think he can put him in a triangle, use it to reverse. I don't think it's submit Jack, but I don't think Jack will control him for too long either. So yeah, it's a great fight, boys. It's an absolutely fantastic fight. I could go on about it for days. So boys, my official prediction for this one is going to be Carlos Prates gets the win. I mean, I'm sure you've understood that by now. And I'm actually going to predict him to get a win via knockout. There's many reasons for that, boys. I mean, the main reason he's never won a decision in the UFC. You know, every single win has been via knockout. And in his lone loss, he almost got a knockout. So it would be kind of silly for me to predict decision here. But I also feel like if the odds are good enough for a decision, I would actually lean that over a KO. Boys, it's always about the odds. You know, it's not about what I think is going to happen. Obviously, that's a big part of it, but even bigger part of it is the odds. Because if they give me Jack Della Maddalena to win via KO at 5 million to 1, even though I'm picking Carlos Prates to win the fight, I'm going to bet a lot of money on 5 million to 1 Jack Della Maddalena via KO. You know, so it's about the odds more than my pick. And if they give me some good odds for like a decision, I would potentially bet it. I think it's going to be an absolute war and one of the biggest sweats ever. And that's why I have to get banging odds on it. I am ultimately predicting a KO though. Unfortunately, the odds are not out yet, so I cannot give you, any breakdowns on the prop odds. But yeah, at the current line of minus 110, you can actually get in plus 105 at the moment on Polymarket and a couple of other books. I definitely feel like Carlos Prates is the value side as the underdog or pick him, because I just think he has more diverse skill set, which means more ways to win the fight, So yeah, it's my prediction, but absolutely great fight. I love Jack Della Maddalena as well. Respect him massively. I don't like to pick against him. Only ever picked against him twice. One time against Ramazan Ameev. Bad bet. Actually, I don't even know if I picked against him. I bet Ameev at like plus 150. I'm not sure who I picked. Probably Ameev, I think it was, though. And then I picked against him against Islam. Every other fight I've bet on him. Literally bet on him, not even picked him. Like, except for his minus 800, minus 500 runs, I've bet on him against basically every fighter in the division because I think he's that high level. And if I didn't bet on his money line, I bet on him inside the distance. So I rate him highly. I just rate Carlos a little bit higher. And I think Carlos is going to win the fight and get a title shot next. He has actually called for that himself. In a recent interview, he said once he knocks out Jack Della Maddalena, it's going to be 2 knockouts in a row of former champions, and he needs a title shot next. He's not fighting anyone else. I don't know if he said he ain't fighting anyone else, but he said title shot next, definitely. So yeah, Carlos Prates to win via KO is my official prediction. Next up is the lightweight division, as we have Beneil Dariush taking on Quillan Salkilld. Beneil Dariush coming into this fight with a record of 23 wins, 7 losses, 1 draw. Quillan Salkilld, on the other hand, 11 wins, 1 loss. So the odds for this fight, boys, and just to make you aware, these odds were only released today, so they may move by the time you're seeing this video. But currently, we have Quillan Salkilld as the minus 500 favorite, with the underdog price tag on Beneil Dariush sitting at plus 375 odds. Yeah, this one is a very interesting one for me, boys, because it really comes down to if Beneil Dariush can take a punch anymore. You know, because if he can, then he has a good shot of winning this fight. And if he can take a punch, he has a good shot of beating any man on the entire planet. Against Topuria, even if he had a elite chin, he'd probably still get cracked. You know, Topuria just hits way too hard. But against the former champion, Islam, I think he could compete with him. I really do. Yes, I said it. Beneil Dariush could potentially beat Islam Makhachev if he has a rock chin. The issue is, he doesn't have a rock chin. If my granddad had wheels, he would be a bicycle. You know, it's kind of that same thing. But we have to acknowledge that Beneil Dariush's only lacking quality is really his chin. Yes, you can say he tires out cardio and stuff like that, but he pushes through extremely well. And outside of that, man, the entire game is just fantastic, man. I mean, his offensive wrestling, his defensive wrestling, his striking is pretty solid in general as well. The way he lands front kicks to the face, very good body kicks, quite smart in the striking as well. High fight IQ, although technically he's not like the best. When I look at him, I'm not like, yeah, that's a great striker, but in MMA he's adapted it to be very good, and his wrestling and grappling is like literally some of the best that we've ever seen in the UFC. You know, it's like so good. His scrambling ability is amazing. I mean, he's a fantastic fighter. He just can't take a punch. And the last fight against Benoit Saint Denis showed it brutally. You know, I bet on Benoit Saint Denis to win inside the distance there, and I think it was like pick'em, like 50% implied, and it was like, I mean, it looked about 90%. It was a 16-second knockout in round one, and Beneil Dariush said this himself, and I listened to this during my narrative research. He said that, yes, okay, it was an early knockout, but if I couldn't take that punch from Benoit versus Beneil. Beneil Dariush said, if I couldn't take that punch from Benoit Saint Denis that night, then I wasn't going to take the next punch or the next 100 or the punch in round 2, you know? So that's kind of how I saw the fight. Like, yes, it was a meme knockout, but I feel like that was always going to happen. I mean, there's a reason I bet on it. We saw what happened with him against Moicano in a fight that he absolutely dominated outside of one moment where he almost lost the entire fight because he got knocked down by Moicano, who is not a power puncher, in my opinion. The 2 fights before that are straight round 1 knockout losses by not power puncher Arman Sarukian and power puncher Charles Oliveira, you know? So yes, he's losing to the best of the best, I guess, in Charles and Arman, but I don't think Benoit is the best of the best. I think he's a very good fighter. I don't think he's the best of the best though. You know, he's top 5 maybe. You know, he's like gatekeeper to the top 5, I would say. I don't even think I would place him top 5. Beneil's 36 years old now, and if you go back and look at his, like I've just mentioned, the last 3 years of his fights, he's just getting knocked out, man. Before that, his chin was holding up well, but even back in the day, the guy got slumped by Alexander Hernandez, who is nowhere near his level. I also remember he was dominating Edson Barbosa, then got knocked out with a flying knee. Now, that shot was brutal and would have knocked out anyone, but I just feel like Beneil Dariush has always had semi-chin issues. When you get knocked out by Alexander Hernandez in 40 seconds, you do have semi-chin issues. I know Alex hits hard, but you get what I'm trying to say, especially when you add on the fact that even now, like 10 years later, he's getting knocked out consistently. I just think Quillan's going to knock him out, boys. That's all I really have to say. I could go in depth a little bit more, but I'm not really going to. I think Quillan Salkilld, the inventor of sex, apparently, I don't know what's going on social media, but I've seen that all over the place. I think he's going to get a knockout in this fight again. And I think the UFC are setting him up to get a knockout. There's a reason they gave him Jamie Malarkey, you know, and made him a -4, 5, 6, 7, 900 favorite, 1,000 favorite. There's a reason why they're giving him Beneil Dariush. I actually did some research on this and heard Beneil Dariush talk about he believes that the weight cut is his issue, why he can't take shots, and he wanted to move up to 170 pounds because of that. And he actually missed weight last time out as well. So that's a little interesting tidbit. Not only that, he said the UFC shut down his plans to move up to 170. They did not like the move, even though it's clear to see that Beneil needs to move up in weight to at least test out his chin at welterweight, because it is looking like he's got no chin at lightweight now. So it's crazy for the UFC to shut that down and book him against Manuel Torres and Quillan Salkilld, 2 of the legitimate future prospects / contenders in the lightweight division, some new blood in the division. And you want to book him against the veteran in Beneil Dariush, who doesn't even want to be in the weight class anymore? There's a reason they're doing that, boys. And as I always say, we don't just blindly bet on what we think the UFC wants, because the UFC gets shit wrong all of the time. But when it aligns with our own beliefs on what will happen based on our tape study, that's when we can kind of either hammer a spot or be confident in our bet, our play, or our prediction at least, depending on the odds. You know, it doesn't matter what prediction you have. It all matters what the odds are based on that in the context with your prediction. So my prediction is Quillan knocks this guy out, and I think the UFC want it to happen. Shameful to say to some degree, but it's a business. And I also believe that from what I've seen on tape, that's going to happen. So I got Quillan KO in round 1 as my official prediction. Next up, we have Tim Elliott taking on Steve Erceg. Tim Elliott coming into this fight with a record of 21 wins, 13 losses, 1 draw. Steve Erceg, on the other hand, 13 wins with 4 losses. We have Steve Erceg as the minus 400 favorite with the underdog price tag on Tim Elliott sitting at plus 300 odds. So this is a very interesting fight for me, boys, and not easy to predict exactly how it's going to play out. But I do think that no matter what happens within the fight, there's definitely a most likely ending. And I'll just tell you that straight up before I even get into the breakdown. The most likely ending, in my opinion, is that Tim Elliott starts to gas out and Steve Erceg takes over the later rounds. Almost like he did in his fight against Ode Osborne, where he started to dominate the later rounds after having a very tough early going of the fight, almost getting finished in that fight. And that was one of the most tilting fights, not only to watch live, but also to watch back, because I watched it the other day. I had a bet on Steve Erceg and Ode Osborne to not go decision. And to see that fight go to decision, it's just absolutely brutal, man. But it is what it is. That's the sport, you know. Those are the breaks sometimes. And the reason I see Steve Erceg taking over late is, one, that's kind of what he has done to a lot of fighters. I mean, Alessandro Costa fight, it was 1-1 going into round 3. Steve Erceg took over in round 3 to win himself that fight. The aforementioned Ode Osborne fight grinds him down later into the round. And if you look at Elliott's career, it's kind of the same thing, man. Elliott usually dominates the fight, does really well, and either wins via submission or ends up grinding out an extremely close decision, or he starts to get tired, he starts to fade, he starts to be a lot slower in the wrestling, grappling transitions, and he gets himself finished. Now, to be fair to him, he is a very, very solid fighter, extremely high-level veteran, and he's only really been beat by the best in the entire division, outside of maybe Matheus Nicolau, and Nicolau's a very, very skilled fighter. You know, you're talking Matheus Nicolau, Davison Figueiredo, Askar Askarov, which is crazy that guy ended up retiring because, you know, he beat Pantoja. Crazy, maybe could have been champion one day. Also, Muhammad Micallef and Brandon Royval. You're talking about title challengers, fighters that could or should have fought for the title, and former title holders, you know. So there's no shame in the losses he's had. You go back in the day, he does have some lower level losses, but he also has some elite losses even 10 years ago. The likes of Demetrius Johnson and Joseph Benavidez, you know. So the guy basically only loses to the best for the most part, and definitely in the last 5 years, he's only lost to literal title contenders or future title champions like Muhammad Micallef, you know. So it's tough to pick against him, you know, but I just feel like Steve Erceg is at a high enough level to not get finished by Tim Elliott. And if he doesn't get finished, I do expect his cardio to start to play a big factor in the later rounds. And I think Steve Erceg will be the one having wrestling success of his own. If he's not in the first 7.5 minutes, I think he will in the last 7.5 minutes. And I think that's going to leave a lasting effect on the judges more than the early rounds. You know, I think Steve Erceg is going to win round 2 and round 3 and maybe even finish in round 3 like Muhammad Micallef was able to do, or maybe even finish in round 2 like Brandon Royval was able to do, and probably via submission like those guys was able to do. You know, Tim starts off very hot, but when he can't get his game going consistently, he tires out, he slows down. And from what I've seen of Steve Erceg's ground game and grappling, he will be able to make Tim Elliott tired, even if he does lose round 1 and get taken down and Tim's looking really, really good, which I could see happening. I don't think Tim's going to be able to keep it up and last the entire 15-minute distance. I could be wrong and Tim wins again as an underdog, but I'm banking on I'm not wrong, obviously. That's what I'm trying to do in every fight, every video, every week, every year. And I will go with Steve Erceg to win this fight via submission in round 3 as my official prediction. Quick one before we move on to the next fight, boys. As I always mention, every single bet that I place is tracked via a third party that tracks my bets over the last 7 years. So you can literally go back and look at every single bet I've placed for the last 7 years. So unlike most of these cappers online, I'm actually tracked. You can actually see my bets. So don't take my word for my results. You can go and check my results for yourself. This year, to be fully transparent, we've been on a downtrend and the results have been poor and completely unlike the past 7 years of my results. But in sports betting, that happens. Downtrends are normal, and sometimes you have extreme uptrends, sometimes you have extreme downtrends. But over the long term, all that matters is that you win more than you lose. And that's exactly what we do. So much so that a $10,000 starting bankroll on my service would have earned over $480,000. Right, 10K to 480K. Real results on a 25 unit scaling model. On a more conservative scaling model, you would have earned over 200,000. 10K to 200,000. Almost no service on the entire planet can state those numbers with verifiable facts. So downtrend currently, but uptrend overall, and brutal uptrend at that. If you want to get all of my bets, you hit the link in my bio, sublaunch.com/lucrative MMA, and you can copy and paste the exact bets that I personally place every single week. Track numbers, I'm fully transparent, unlike most of what you see online. Let's get into the next fights now. Next up, it's Shamil Gaziev taking on the Balkan Bear, Brando, Peričić. Shamil Gaziev coming into this fight, 14 wins, only 2 losses. Brando, Peričić, on the other hand, 6 wins with only 1 loss. Currently, they have the Balkan Bear Brando as a -155 favorite, with the underdog price tag on Shamil Gaziev sitting at +135 odds. Yeah, so in comes the Balkan Bear, boys. If you watch this channel for a couple of months and you've heard me break down Brando's fights before, then you will know, but a lot of you won't. I know Brando in real life, so I'm going to be quick on this one, boys. Obviously, I'm picking Brando to win the fight. I think that he has high-level firepower, and someone like Gaziev coming back off a knockout loss against Waldo Cortez Acosta, the first knockout loss of his entire career. Well, true knockout loss. He did lose via knockout against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, but this one was a clear-cut knockout by Waldo. You know, coming back against someone with the firepower of Brando, I don't think it's great for him. There's a reason why they're putting Brando up against Gaziev, one of the tougher fights in the division for him. Gaziev is a top 5, top 10 fighter. You know, they're rushing Brando at this point. They know he's got hype, star power, and knockout power, and that's what I'm going with this weekend. Knockout for the Balkan Bear, but it's not an easy fight for him. Gaziev is, like I said, one of the best in the division. The thing about Gaziev, which is good, is that he can do both. You know, he can grapple you, but he can also strike, you know. So I'm interested to see what game plan he employs here against Brando, because in the Waldo fight, he kind of just walked forward into range, showed him no respect, got knocked out for it. So is he going to change his game plan here, go back to the wrestling? I don't really know. I don't really care. We're rooting for Brando in this fight. So yeah, Balkan Bear, round 1 knockout, my prediction. Next up, we have Junior Tafa taking on Kevin Christian. Junior Tafa, pretty poor looking record with 6 wins, 5 losses. Kevin Christian, on the other hand, 9 wins, 3 losses. Junior Tafa currently sits as the -185 favorite on this one, with the underdog price tag on Kevin Christian sitting at +160 odds. Oh, this is a bit of an ugly one, boys. I mean, I have to be honest and say that Kevin Christian is probably one of the worst fighters on the UFC roster today, in my opinion. And Junior Tafa has a record of 6-5 and a negative record in the UFC. Junior Tafa currently 2 wins and 5 losses. In the UFC, Kevin Christian 0-1. You know, so not a very high level fight here, but I do side with Junior Tafa in this one fairly confidently, as confident as you can be with someone who has a 2-5 record in the UFC. And the reason is simply because I think he's a much better striker. You know, I don't think Kevin Christian has the wrestling or grappling to take the fight to the ground consistently, although obviously it is a fight. It can happen. I don't think that over the course of 100 fights, if these guys were to fight 100 times, I don't think Kevin Christian takes him down consistently over those 100 fights. Of course, you know, throughout a few of those fights, Junior Tafa is going to slip on a banana peel. Maybe Kevin does get a takedown. The single leg works, you know, once or twice. But for the most part, I think Junior Tafa has enough takedown defense to keep the fight on the feet. And then on the feet, I have Junior Tafa all day here. You know, the way to beat Junior Tafa for the most part is to take him down. And we've seen in his last fight against Billy Ellicana, he gets taken down, controlled, and then dominated, and subsequently rear naked choked in that fight. The fight before that, Tuco Tucos, he lands big shots on Tuco because he is a good striker. And then what happens? He gets taken down and he gets hurt. He gets beat up a little bit and he gets arm triangle choked in round 2 as well, just like the Billy Ellicana fight. So the blueprint to beat Junior Tafa is out there. The blueprint to beat Kevin Christian is not even necessarily out there, because he hasn't had many fights in the UFC. He's fought complete cans on the regional scene. And the fights that he has lost, they haven't gone the same way each time. Unlike Junior Tafa, yes, you can mention the Marcos Rogerio de Lima leg kick knockout, but at the end of the day, de Lima is just so many levels above Junior and Kevin Christian that it's not even relatable. So yeah, the blueprint might not be out there for Kevin as it is on Junior Tafa, but I don't think that Kevin can follow the blueprint that is out there to be Junior Tafa. And I just get the sense that Junior Tafa is the much better striker. You know, when I watch these guys strike, when I watch the way they make reads in the octagon, the power on their punches, the accuracy, the precision, the technicality in which they throw strikes, and just the ability to land shots on their opponents in the UFC and on the regional scene for Kevin, it just seems like the Junior Tafa is 1 or even 2 levels above, you know? And that should be enough to win him the fight if Kevin isn't getting his grappling going, which I don't think he will be able to do. I got Junior Tafa on this one, and I have Junior Tafa via knockout. Next up on the card, we have Jacob Malkoun taking on Gerald Meerschaert. Jacob Malkoun coming into this fight, 9 wins, 3 losses. Gerald Meerschaert, on the other hand, crazy veteran record, 37 wins and 21 losses, which makes him by far the most experienced MMA fighter on the entire fight card with over 50 fights. As expected, Jacob Malkoun is a massive -800 favorite with the underdog price tag on GM3 Gerald Meerschaert sitting at plus 550 odds. Yeah, this is a weird one. Weird matchmaking to some degree. I mean, Jacob Malkoun is not getting any younger, but I mean, he's in his prime now. He's 30. He had a fight already this year. I feel like it's go time now. I guess GM3 is a step up, and I guess GM3 is go time. You know, if you beat GM3, you know, thinking about it, to be honest, they do use GM3 as a bit of a stepping stone. Like if you beat GM3, you're kind of, you get a little bit of a name. You're like, oh, this guy just beat GM3. That kind of means like he might go on a bit of a run now. So I guess, you know, this is probably a good fight for him. I just feel like it's weird matchmaking. I mean, I got Jacob Malkoun comfortably winning this fight. You know, like I don't think it's like a close fight. I guess Jacob Malkoun could potentially not find the finish because he isn't really that potent with his striking. And GM3 tends to not get submitted unless like you're a really high level submission guy like Reina Derrida. And so I guess more than likely the fight goes into the later rounds, round 2 and round 3, because GM3 either gets finished in round 1 or basically wins in round 3 or ends up going to decision. You know, you don't really finish him late or in round 2 for the most part. So it's like, I guess if the fight goes into later rounds, GM3 could potentially jump on a guillotine. You know, Jacob Malkoun probably will start to shoot takedowns because that is literally his whole game. Even though he did box with Torres Finney quite well in his last fight, I do think his entire game is basically based around a single leg and grappling, kind of like Mateusz Gamrot. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if Jacob starts to shoot takedowns in the later rounds. And if you do that, you're always going to give yourself a chance of losing via submission to Gerald Meerschaert's patented guillotine Darce choke front headlock or some submission in round 3 usually. But to me, Gerald's looking more washed than he's ever been. I think the Brad Tavares performance was pretty poor, in my opinion. Obviously, Carl Dorcas going through you in a minute is not amazing either. He had nothing for Michelle Alexejczyk, which I knew he wouldn't. You know, bet on Michelle, KO, round 1, all of that in that fight as well. But I just feel like he's definitely not the same level of fighter he was 4 or 5 years ago. He's 38 years old now. I don't see a coherent path to victory outside of Jacob Malkoun beating up Gerald Meerschaert for 2 rounds and getting tired and then shooting a bad takedown. But even that seems unlikely in my head, man. So I got Jacob Malkoun here. I got him very comfortably. I'll take him to win, I guess, TKO, just because that is how Gerald Meerschaert loves to get beat, you know, for the most part. And Malkoun is a good wrestler, but he showed a lot of striking last time out. And I feel like Meerschaert's chin is getting worse and worse. So I'm just going to pick TKO, but I'm not super confident on the method. It could honestly be anything. I just got Malkoun all day here. It would be interesting to see Gerald Meerschaert win because he's going to F up a lot of parlays. I'm assuming Malkoun's going to be in a lot of parlays this weekend. Gerald Meerschaert actually has a funny clip that I noticed from the Casuals MMA pod when I was doing my research. I'll just play the clip. It's like 5 seconds. It's right here.
Ask you something. How good does it feel to f up somebody's parlay?
Yeah, what's that feeling like?
So good. So good.
So yeah, you know, maybe there's another parlay that Gerald F's up, but for the most part, I think that Gerald's going to be the one being F'd up and Jacob Malkoun is going to be the one cashing for people in their parlays this weekend. Jacob Malkoun TKO is my official prediction. Next up, we have Cam Rowston taking on Robert Bryczek. Cam Rowston coming into this fight, 14 wins, 3 losses. Robert Bryczek coming into this fight, 18 wins, 6 losses. Interesting fight here for me, boys. Cam Rowston, a big favorite here, minus 260 with the underdog price tag on Robert Bryczek, sitting at plus 220. 180. Yeah, this is a strange one for me, boys, because I feel like the matchmaking here is not good. You know, Cam Rowston is a prospect who has gained some hype, especially coming out of the City Kickboxing camp within New Zealand with Australia, and I thought that they would build this guy up a little bit slower. I mean, you see with his performance in his debut against Andre Petroski that he has something there to build on. So then they give him Cody Brundage, which made a lot of sense to me. The matchmaking made complete sense. You know, Cody Brundage has a semi-big name in the MMA scene, but loses most of his fights. And so that was an obvious matchup that I thought they would make, and they did. But now with this Robert Bryczek matchup, it's like it's a very dangerous fight for Cam. You know, a very dangerous fight because the Polish man has a lot of power in his fists. Even late into fights, he carries his power, which is dangerous for someone like Cam Rowston, who can be cracked, who does have a bit of that toolman defense. We saw in Robert Bryczek's last fight that he does indeed carry that power late because he got a third round knockout over Brad Tavares after hurting him badly in round one. And then, you know, Brad was kind of coming back into it in the middle round. I will say, though, Robert is a lot better than we thought. I think, you know, not even we thought. You know, I did bet on Robert at plus 180 odds against Brad Tavares last time out. So I did believe he was a lot better than the market thought, at least. When I say we, you know, we're all sports bettors here, so we are the market. And I did feel they underrated him there because of his performance against Ihor Peteria. But you have to remember that that was a UFC debut, and fighters oftentimes just don't perform in their UFC debut. He was a favorite in that fight, you know, so everyone expected him to win, and he just didn't perform on his UFC debut. And Ihor actually has a very good chin, contrary to popular belief, you know, and Robert was just never able to really get going in that fight. But going into that matchup, going into his UFC debut, Robert was coming off a 5-fight knockout streak. Every single knockout coming in round one. So the guy has a lot of power, and the guy seems to be very durable. Only one of his 6 losses come via knockout, you know, so you, for the most part, you're going to have to submit him or decision him, but he's probably going to have a big chance of knocking you out. He was knocked out one time by Kike Brito on the regional scene, but Kike Brito is an absolute animal. If you haven't heard of him, he did fight Oban Elliott in the Contender Series. He almost knocked out Oban Elliott back in the day, maybe like 3-4 years ago. Oban was able to grind him out there. It was a very tough fight, but this guy's just slumping people on the regional scene. He literally just became Octagon welterweight champion with a brutal knockout in round one just a couple of months ago. So Kike Brito knockout loss is not that bad of a loss on your record, honestly. So outside of that, he's never been knocked out. The guy's extremely durable, you know, so he's going to walk forward into range here, try and knock Cam out. And I don't think Cam's going to be able to do what he did against Cody Brundage or even what he did against Andre Petroski, you know. Even his Dana White's Contender Series fight where he won via first round knockout, you know, not the Torres-Finney fight, but when he came back again. I don't think any of those free path to victories are available to Cam here against Robert, you know, so it makes it a hard fight for him. Look, obviously things can happen. I'm not saying it's impossible Cam could get a knockout in round one or Weather the Storm would get a knockout in round two like he did against Cody Brundage, but I just don't think it's going to happen. You know, I think Robert's extremely tough. I think Robert's a lot better than those guys, to be honest. And I think he hits harder than every single person he's fought, you know. So it's going to be a tough fight for Cam here. I'm backing Cam to do it. You know, I think that he's more skillful than Robert. You know, I think he can stay on the outside. I think he can slap kicks on the outside and be smart, not engage in a war like he kind of did in his last few fights, to be honest. I mean, Andre Petroski one, he wasn't necessarily engaging in a war. He kind of just caught him with a perfect shot. But on the Contender Series, he walked forward into range and landed some big shots. He didn't mind going to war there, even though it didn't really pan out to be a war. And then against Cody Brundage, to some degree, he was going to war at times there, you know, and I think that would be a poor judgment from him if he does that this weekend against Robert Bryczek, because Robert Bryczek is probably going to win that war, honestly. You know, if you go to war with Robert, most likely he's going to win because he's really durable and he hits hard, like I said, but I think the overall game of Cam Rowston is definitely more deep than Robert Bryczek. You know, Robert has very good hands. He's a very strong, solid guy, hard to put away, but at the end of the day, you can run circles on him on the outside, like has happened to him multiple times in his career. And you can outskill him with in and out movement, with being a little bit faster, not engaging in the brawl, being a matador to the ball and, you know, getting some top time as well. And if Cam does that, he's going to be in with a chance of winning and even winning confidently, potentially even with a finish. You know, I think that Cam Rowston's ground game is actually a level or two above Robert Bryczek's. You know, I don't really trust Robert to stay safe for 15 minutes if Cam's just grappling him. Now, I don't think Cam's going to have maybe the easiest time taking him down. I have to really think about that one, ponder on it a little bit more, and maybe even watch a little bit more tape, as I often do as fight week comes around, just to look at specifics. And one of the specifics, which not super confident on right now, is the wrestling, is the grappling, is the strength advantage or disadvantage between Cam and Rob. You know, like who is going to be able to win those battles, win those underhook clinch battles? Is Cam going to be able to drag him down? What specific takedowns are going to be there for Cam? These are the type of things which, I want to look into a little bit more. And I do think if Cam gets him down, he could definitely control rounds, win rounds, and maybe even get a submission rear naked choke, something like that. And as I said, on the feet, he does have a path to stay on the outside, mix in some clinches every now and then, stay away from the big shot, and win on volume. So I'm going to pick Cam for that reason. Multiple paths to victory, whereas Robert needs a KO here, in my opinion. Yes, he could win on damage. Maybe if he knocks Cam down in 2 out of 3 rounds and doesn't knock him out, then he could win a decision. But like he was almost on the way to doing against Brad Tavares, if Brad was able to survive that last barrage, Robert still would have won via decision because he would have won the first and third rounds. But yeah, it's more unlikely. But ultimately, my prediction will be Cam Rowston to win this fight via decision. Next up, it's Kody Steele taking on Dom Marfan. Very interested to see the grappling sequences in this one. Kody Steele coming into this fight with a record of 7 wins, 1 loss. Dom Marfan, on the other hand, 9 wins, 2 losses. Kody Steele was the favorite at minus 163 odds, with the underdog price tag on Dom Marfan sitting at plus 143. This is a very fun fight, and I don't know whether it's going to be a fun fight on the feet or in the grappling, but wherever it is, I still think it's going to be a fun fight. Much like the Cam Rowston and Robert Bryczek fight, I actually want to do a little bit more tape study to try and come to the conclusion of whether Kody Steele is going to try and grapple Dom Marfan or not. And if he doesn't, how Dom Marfan is going to fare at trying to grapple Kody Steele, because that's really where the fight comes down to for me. And I have a prediction on it, but I am actually going to look into it a little bit deeper. There's certain fights which I end up looking into deeper. There's certain fights which I look into once and I'm like, yeah, I'm very confident there. I don't need to look into this anymore. Kody Steele and Dom Marfan is a very interesting puzzle for me. And the reason is because Dom Marfan likes to do his best work when sometimes he actually gets taken down himself and reversing position, and Kody Steele is a semi-credentialed wrestler and grappler. So maybe he is going to, shoot takedowns here, and that could put him in some trouble. On the other hand, I feel like Kody Steele is shorter, stockier, stronger, has a strength advantage over Dom Marfan, so he probably will be the one dictating where the fight goes. Dom Marfan is a very aggressive grappler, very aggressive wrestler. He tries his best to secure top time, and as of recording this, I tend to believe that Kody Steele's game is going to be a bit of a kryptonite for Dom Marfan's game, and if that's the case, Kody Steele's going to win the bout. Kody is coming off a very exciting performance, but maybe a little bit of a poor performance against Zhu Rong. He was a massive favorite in that one. Me and everybody in the Elite Zone bet on Rong Zhu, cashed him at plus 200 or even higher odds. But Kody Steele was expected to win that fight. Kody Steele was expected to be able to grapple Zhu Rong in that fight. He wasn't. And he was also expected to be able to, land big shots in that fight. He wasn't really. He definitely landed some big shots, but Zhu Rong landed the bigger shots. He outlanded him 125 to 65, something like that. I saw on UFC stats. And he did land a lone knockdown of the fight, Zhu Rong, So I think a lot of the hype from Kody Steele has probably disappeared after that fight. But this is not that fight. He's not fighting a veteran in the UFC, which Zhu Rong is at this point, even considering his young age. He's not fighting someone with a clear striking advantage over him. If anything, Kody Steele has the striking advantage in this fight. And he has an extremely long and in-depth grappling background as well. So I don't expect Dom Marfan to just take him down and dominate him there. I do think that maybe Dom Marfan could get top position at times, and he's almost guaranteed to do so because he's just going to try so hard, But I do think Kody Steele has, from what I've seen so far, the ability in the wrestling, even though it's not great, but the physicality in the wrestling to defend the takedowns. And if he is taken down, he's very good at jiu-jitsu. Kody Steele is a grappler by trade. He is a jiu-jitsu fighter. You might not know that watching his Dana White's Contender Series fight, where he just walks Chase and Blair down for most of the fight and then finishes him with a body shot. And then obviously that Zhu Rong war, because they did go to war there. I believe it was even awarded fight of the night. You wouldn't know that he's a grappler by base, but he is definitely a grappler. So I don't think Don Marfan is going to have too much success doing what he needs to do to win a fight, you know? Don Marfan's a very good fighter. He's only ever lost to Quillan Salkilld. You know, he's got 2 losses on his career. They've both been to Quillan Salkilld. Quillan kind of just out-wrestled him, got on top, basically beat him 2 positions. And that's Don Marfan's entire game. So if you can shut down his wrestling, grappling, takedown game, he doesn't have too much more to offer. No one's really been able to do it in the UFC road to UFC level yet, outside of Quillan Salkilld, but I actually think Kody Steele has the style to be able to do it. So if he's not super down on himself after that performance against Zhu Rong, where he was a big favorite, was expected to win, let a lot of people down, you know, it is what it is. Who gives a if you let people down? It's all about yourself, really, at the end of the day. You know, like as an MMA fighter, you can't take on the burden of everyone else. So I'm not saying that in any other way other than to put context into the mindset of Kody Steele. And we have seen many times where these fighters have a poor performance and they lose confidence and they're not really the same for a couple of fights, you know. So that is a possibility here, but from what I've seen from Kody, he's not really the type of guy that will happen to. And if not, I think he wins the fight, you know. So like I said, boys, I am going to go back and retape some of this, specifically the grappling and wrestling sequences of Kody Steele, not really of Don Marfan. That's his entire tape. I know him in depth. But Kody Steele, because the couple of fights I did watch against Blair and Wrong, there wasn't a lot of wrestling. There was a couple of attempts. They never really got into grappling sequences that I want to see in regards to this Don Marfan fight. So I'm going to tape it a little bit more, but currently I have Kody Steele. I don't think my prediction will change either, knowing Kody Steele. So I'll take Kody Steele to win this one, and I'll take Kody Steele to win this one via knockout. Don Marfan has been finished in all 3 of his losses, amateur and pro. And I do think Kody Steele hits extremely hard, and Don Marfan is the inferior striker here. Might have some tall man defense, and Kody could land a knockout. So yeah, I'll take Kody Steele via knockout. Jonathan Micallef is taking on Themba Gorimbo in the next fight. Jonathan Micallef coming into this fight, 9 wins, 1 loss. Themba Gorimbo, on the other hand, 14 wins, 6 losses. Jonathan Micallef currently the big -285 favorite, with the underdog price tag on Themba Gorimbo sitting at +245. So as we get further and further down the card, I see more and more strange matchups. And I do think this fight is a little bit of a strange booking. But if I actually think a little bit more in depth, maybe the UFC are just trying to continue to build Jonathan Micallef here against someone who has shown time and time again bad mistakes in the grappling, you know? So maybe it's perfect matchmaking, actually. And maybe it isn't what meets the eye initially, which is a little bit of a strange matchup. You know, Themba coming off 2 losses, who was a little bit of a hyped star, you know, so hyped that The Rock actually bought him a house. You know, I remember that was super viral. And Jonathan Micallef, you know, he's on a great win streak right now. He's on a 4-fight win streak. I felt maybe he would get more of a step up in competition after his last submission win. He was able to take out Elliott via submission. I actually cashed on him via submission. I was there live to watch that as well. So that was absolutely electric to see that go down. And I feel like the UFC likes Jonathan Micallef and they might try build him up. I guess this is a build-up fight to some degree, but Themba Gorimbo is not an easy fight for Jonathan Micallef, you know, and that's kind of why I was thinking, like, you know, maybe the matchmaking was a little bit strange, but yeah, like I said, I was probably jumping the gun a bit there. But the reason I thought it initially, because Themba Gorimbo, although he does make mistakes in the grappling, he's very physical himself, and it's not easy to get him down unless you're extremely physical powerhouse yourself, like Jeremiah Wells, you know. And Jonathan Micallef just isn't that type of guy. Jonathan Micallef is a very opportunistic submission fighter, doesn't pursue the grappling as much as maybe he should, likes to stay on the outside at times, throw kicks like he did against Kevin Jusay, like he did against Alden Bates before the knockout. But I do feel like he should be trying to get Themba to the ground, because I just think there's a big skill gap when it comes to jiu-jitsu. You know, I think Micallef is so much higher level at jiu-jitsu, so much more tricky. And I don't think it's going to be hard for him to find a submission if he has any top time or control time, or maybe even bottom time with the triangle and arm bars there against Themba Gorimbo. You know, I really think there's a level difference on the mat. It's just, I don't know if Jonathan Micallef has the physicality or wrestling to take it there, because Themba's still a physical guy. I think he can defend the takedowns here, you know, and I feel like it might even be Themba shooting a takedown and getting himself guillotined before Jonathan is able to take him down. Jonathan, in my opinion, should be maximizing his wrestling. You know, he should know that he is a level above a lot of these fighters if it gets to the ground. So he needs to be maximizing his wrestling. You know, putting some real muscle on, some explosive muscle. He needs to be working on his explosivity so he can explode into takedowns, wrestling technique. Like, that should be the bulk of his training. I don't know if it is or it isn't, but from what I've seen in the octagon, his wrestling still needs some work. And that's my only worry here with his fight against Themba is like, is he going to be physical or is he going to be wrestling savvy enough to take Themba down? If not, and it's a striking fight, it becomes very weird. I still favor Jonathan in that realm to some degree, but Themba hits harder. One thing that could be considered a little bit of a wild card that I found out during my research into this fight is that Themba Gorimbo has been living and training in North Ossetia for the last 4 months. If you don't know what North Ossetia is, it's one of the highest level MMA regions in the entire world. It's in the Republic of Russia. It's basically an unknown Dagestan. Think of it that way. Arman Sarukian goes up there and trains consistently, and he can be seen here with Themba Gorimbo himself. Shamil Musayev, one of the best MMA fighters in the world, also trains there, and many, many other killers that will never be known in MMA. So Themba Gorimbo has been getting the best training he can, specifically in the wrestling, which is very interesting for me because, as I mentioned, Jonathan Micallef, best path to victory is getting the fight to the ground. And if Themba's been wrestling and training with these guys for the last 4 months, it's not going to be easy for Jonathan to do that to him. I also feel like a wild card with that is that Themba Gorimbo's probably going to be even more confident in his wrestling game because he always wrestles every opponent anyway. So he's probably going to be even more confident. So that's why I said earlier, he's probably going to shoot on Jonathan Micallef. And that is where I see the level difference showing itself on the mat because Themba takes Jonathan down, not the other way around. But like I said, if Themba's smart and just says to himself, you know what, I've got heavier hands than Jonathan and I'm a better wrestler, I'm going to keep the fight on the feet, maybe use my wrestling to win cage time and cage press him because wrestling up against the cage is still extremely beneficial for winning rounds, and it's a whole different aspect. You can't really get submitted up against the cage unless you're Amanda Lemos, rest in peace, to Miguel against Jessica Andrade, you know, and almost Daria Zeleznikova last week, Melissa Crodom round 3. Do not at me, please. That is brutal. But it is what it is. For those of you who know what I just said, you know what I just said. Most of you are like, what the hell is this guy talking about? So that's basically my breakdown of the fight, boys. You know, I can go on this one for a while. I just feel like Themba can win the fight if he's smart. I don't think he's going to be smart. I think he's going to shoot at some point. And I think that Jonathan Micallef is going to submit him, you know, so that's it. I'm rooting for Jonathan Micallef on this one. I'm picking Jonathan Micallef to win this fight via submission. Boys, last week I gave out 6 free bets in my completely free Telegram channel and all 6 won. We went 6-0. That was actually on rugby, a different sport. I bet on 13 different sports. And from time to time, I give out free bets on my Telegram. You can join the link down below if you want to get access to those free bets, to my free Telegram, cash giveaways in there as well, and just sports betting information and knowledge overall. As I mentioned earlier, if you actually want more than that and access to my bets, then the link is also in the bio for that, sublaunch.com/lucrative MMA. And let's get on to the next fights. Next up, we have Colby Thicknesse taking on Vince Morales, veteran in the UFC at this point. Colby Thicknesse coming into this fight, pretty shiny record, 8 wins, only 1 loss, coming to a man with the surname of Topuria, so no shame in that. Vince Morales, very different record, double the amount of wins than Colby Thicknesse at 16, but 10 times the amount of losses with 10 losses. Colby Thicknesse sitting as the -153 favorite currently, with the underdog price tag on Vince Morales sitting at +133 odds. Yeah, honestly, boys, another weird booking to me. It's not even another weird booking. It's more another weird fight to break down. I think that's what I actually meant. And the reason I think it's a weird fight to break down is because Vince Morales has all the tools to win a lot of these fights, and he just never does. You know, he was fired from the UFC many years ago. He recently got re-signed to the UFC, and he's lost 3 fights in a row, and he hasn't won any since being re-signed. But his last 2 fights, he had chances of winning them. You know, the Raul Rosas Jr. had some deep submission attempts there. Now, I don't think that's really a winnable fight for him, but I mean, at the end of the day, at points, it looked like he might win the fight just with how deep the submission attempts were. You know, on another day, Raul could go to sleep or Raul could tap out from those, you know. In his fight against Elijah Smith, again, that's like a fight where he could have easily won the fight. It was a very close fight. Again, deep submission attempts. So he has got the skills. It's just always tough to trust him because he doesn't put all of his skills together. And he didn't do it in his first run in the UFC either. And that's what led to him being fired from the UFC. He does have a win over Ayman Zahabi, which now seems to be aging like fine wine. But to be honest, outside of that, he's never really beat anybody of note. You know, he does have a little bit of power in his hands. His boxing game is decent. He has very, very good front chokes. Darce chokes, Peruvian neckties specifically, which is quite a unique submission to have in your arsenal. And he's a good all-round fighter, you know, good cardio, not the best fight IQ, but not the worst. He doesn't make like crazy mistakes. He does make a lot of mistakes in the grappling, but that's because his opponents are forcing the grappling on him. It's not like he's just going out there shooting takedowns all the time, getting reversed like an idiot. You know, he just can't really stuff the takedowns. He can't stuff the wrestling. And now he's coming up against Thicknesse, who actually had a very good performance with the wrestling last time out against Meerschaert. You know, that was a crazy fight. Thicknesse looked like he was losing it for most of it, but somehow, you know, managed to get top positions and do a lot of damage. And not a lot of damage, but, you know, put stamps on the rounds with his top position at times. And he was able to grind out that one, dog out that one. It was extremely hard win for him, but he did get it done as an underdog. And that entire win came from the wrestling. So I guess the question here is like, where is Colby Thicknesse in terms of his overall level, right? Because we really don't know. And where is his wrestling level? Because it didn't look great against Meerschaert. His top control looked decent, but Meerschaert has no grappling, way less than Vince Morales in my opinion, but he has way better takedown defense. So it's a strange one, you know, like he just won a fight against someone who has way better takedown defense than Vince Morales. And Vince loses all of his fights via grappling. At the same time, Meerschaert has no grappling. So if Vince does get taken down, which he will here, I expect him to be able to threaten with front chokes, Darce chokes, Peruvian neckties, stuff like that, guillotines, and work back up to his feet a lot better than Meerschaert was able to. But I also expect Colby Thicknesse to get the fight to the ground a lot easier than he was able to in that fight against Meerschaert. So it's a bit of a tricky puzzle to solve here. Honestly, I want to pick Vince Morales here because he's way more battle tested. You know, he's been in there with much better fighters, and I think he's the better striker. He should be able to land the bigger shots on the feet, and Colby will have the wrestling advantage just because he's going to be relentlessly pursuing it. And I do think he will get takedowns, but I don't think he's going to be able to just grapple F Vince like some of these other fighters were able to do. For example, Raul Rosas Jr., Elijah Smith to some degree at times. I don't really think Colby's going to be able to do that. So he's going to be able to get back to the feet. Vince Morales is going to be a very close fight because he's going to be able to get back to the feet, land shots on the feet. Then Colby will take him down again, but then Vince will get back up to the feet. And Vince doesn't really tire out that much. He's got good cardio. These two have a very solid team. Colby Thicknesse is one of the main training partners of the great Alexander Volkanovski. Vince Morales, on the other hand, regularly trains with Merab Dvalishvili. Really, really tough one for me to call, boys. I mean, another aspect of this fight is that Colby Thicknesse is almost 10 years younger. He's 26. Vince Morales is 35. So you kind of want to go with the youth at that point. This one is really going to depend on the odds for me. Currently, I'm going to pick Vince Morales. The odds are currently not out for Vince Morales as I record this video. We will add them into the video after my breakdowns, but as of this breakdown, the odds are not out, so it's tough for me to, say what is the right side on the betting side. I feel like Vince Morales is going to be an underdog. I'm pretty confident in saying that, and so for that reason, I want to lean to him. I want to say that he wins the fight, but it could be one of those ones where Colby wins the fight on youth, and tenacity. But I think it's going to be a nip and tuck fight. I think it's going to be a very close fight. I don't think any fighter will dominate, and I think it's going to be like 29-28, maybe even a split decision. So I'll go with Vince Morales because I think he's going to be the underdog in a split decision. You want to pick the underdog. So yeah, Vince Morales via decision. My prediction, but I'll have a think about that one a little bit more. Next up, we have Wes Schultz taking on Ben Johnston, who is making his UFC debut. Wes Schultz himself coming back from a very poor UFC debut where he got knocked out inside the first half of a round. Wes Schultz coming into this fight with a record of 8 wins, 3 losses. Ben Johnston, on the other hand, 5 wins, only 1 loss. Bit surprising as I look at these odds with Ben Johnston sitting as the -200 favorite with the underdog price tag on Wes Schultz sitting at +170. Yeah, so boys, I'm saying it again. Another weird booking, and this is the weirdest of the lot, and I'm going to tell you why. So we got Wes Schultz facing Ben Johnston. Ben Johnston is making his UFC debut, but he's coming back from retirement. He hasn't fought in 2 years. He's been retired for 2 years, and he's making his debut in the UFC. Yes, you heard correctly. He's making his debut in the UFC from retirement. So I don't know if I've ever seen that before. I don't think I've ever seen that before. That's like a Bellator style booking. When Bellator get these fighters in who haven't fought in 5 years to fight their up-and-coming prospects and they get knocked out in round 1. That's kind of the type of booking we have here. Although Ben Johnston is a very high-level mixed martial artist. That's the difference between that Bellator and this UFC booking. But he has still been retired for 2 years. So what type of shape is he coming into this fight in? Is he mentally correct? He seems to be in his interviews. Is he physically correct? I don't really know. We don't know. He just had shoulder surgery a year ago during retirement, And even from his own words, and the reason I'm going straight into this narrative part, boys, I'll get into the stylistics in a minute, is because this is one of the most important aspects of the fight to me, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious to think that a fighter being out of retirement for 2 years, making a UFC debut, is a big talking point, right? It's not just narrative. It's legitimately going to affect the fight, 100%, right? Don't know how much. That's a different question, but it will affect the fight, right? So what he said in his interview, Ben Johnston, was that when he got the call for the UFC, he was extremely surprised. He had no idea he was going to get a call. It's very strange for him to receive that call. I seem to have found out that the reason is because the UFC were looking for another Australian fighter by the name of Darcy Vendy, who was the champion over at Eternal MMA, which is also where Ben Johnston fought and became champion as well. And I think the UFC had offered this fella a contract, and from what I hear, he turned it down, something like that. I don't know the exact details, what he got offered, what he turned down, but because they wasn't able to get Darcy, it seemed like they got Ben Johnston. That's how this fight has come about, to my knowledge, based on an interview I watched with Ben Johnston doing my research for this video and into this matchup. So the UFC wasn't really looking to sign Ben Johnston. Ben said that, you know, a few years before that, before his retirement, he was campaigning for the UFC heavily. So they had him on his radar. So, you know, maybe they thought, okay, this Australian has fallen through. Let's call this other guy who we've had on our radar for a while. Maybe they didn't even know he was retired. They just thought he hadn't fought in 2 years. Who knows? But anyway, accepted the fight, came out of retirement, and now he's fighting Wes Schultz. So first things first to me, as a sports better, that's a big red flag, right? I don't want to put my money on people who are coming out of retirement. He could definitely win the fight. In my opinion, much better kickboxer, much better striker. We're going to get into the stylistics in a minute, but I just don't like to see it. So the first things first is like, it's a red flag for me, right? That he was in retirement, he's coming out. Now, the second thing worth mentioning is, who is he? What type of fighter is he? Because obviously you guys won't know because he's never fought in the UFC before, so you won't know who this guy is. So the guy actually was one of the main training partners for Israel Adesanya in his rematch for Alex Pereira, and he actually mimicked Alex Pereira for Izzy. Now, his style isn't like Alex Pereira when you actually watch his tape, but I guess he's an adaptive kickboxer who can mimic fighters, right? So he done a whole training camp with Izzy when Izzy did knock him out, lives in Australia, so flew over to New Zealand for multiple months, lived there, helped Izzy train for Alex. He is also, or was also, a Muay Thai world champion. I don't know what organization. Muay Thai is very fragmented. You can be a Muay Thai world champion and not necessarily too high level because of all the different organizations, but he's a Muay Thai world champion nevertheless. He's a good striker for MMA, I will say that. He knows what he's doing. He has an understanding of reach, range, kicks, punches, seems to have some power on his punches. He's quite clean with his technique. He's very tall, long range. He's definitely going to be the better striker in this fight. Interestingly enough, a lot of his wins have come via submission. And a lot of his wins have come via submission with rear naked chokes where he hasn't even put the hooks in. So he's listed as a black belt in jiu-jitsu on his Instagram. In the fights that I watched, the commentators were calling him a brown belt, but I'm sure he's got his black belt since then. Obviously, he's not lying on his Instagram to all of his followers. So he's a black belt now. When he was competing in MMA, he was a brown belt. Multiple submission wins came from his opponent shooting on him rather than him shooting on his opponents. And he would get a rear naked choke without even putting the hooks in. So yeah, he's dangerous wherever the fight goes, but he's primarily a striker and does like to strike for the most part. In this fight, he ain't going to be going for takedowns. He's going to be striking. Is he susceptible to the wrestling? He doesn't have a long background of fights. He's only got a 5-1 record, and honestly, a lot of his fights are coming against poor level of competition. So I didn't really see him in much adversity. I didn't see him losing fights that he had to come back from. I didn't see how he deals with wrestling, grappling. You know, one fight I did watch was actually his last fight. Well, I watched all of his fights, but one fight where I saw him have some sense of struggle was his last fight against John Martin Fraser, where he became Eternal MMA champion. And John Fraser took him down multiple times there, wrestled him a little bit, but never could do any damage on the ground, could never control him. And he was more of a striker himself. From what it seemed in the fight, he kind of just wanted to offset some of that pressure. So he was able to get 3 takedowns, I believe it was, and he only shot 3 times, but he never did anything. And oftentimes Ben came out on top in those scenarios. And in fact, one of those scenarios led to Ben getting a submission win, you know, and that was another rear naked choke without the hooks in. So, you know, the wrestling actually led to Ben winning. So yeah, that's what type of fighter Ben is. I have seen him be knocked out. His only lone loss was a knockout, but it was kind of a meme knockout. It was a spinning back fist to the head, which he didn't see coming as he was stepping into range. It could happen to anyone. It doesn't mean anything. After that, he kind of got up a little bit, and then there was more shots landed, and the ref jumped in maybe even a little bit early. Like, I feel like Ben may have survived if the ref let it carry on. So that's Ben's entire game, right? You have never seen him in the UFC, so I wanted to go a little bit in depth on who he is, what type of fighter he is. That's who he is. Wes Schultz, you're going to know him a lot more. Wes Schultz is an out-and-out grappler. If Wes Schultz can't grapple you, he's not going to win. At the same time, the only way to beat Wes Schultz is to knock him out early or wait for him to tire out, because he's such a funky fighter. And what I mean by that is he throws strikes from extremely weird angles. His movements are extremely strange. And his takedown offense is also quite weird and unique as well, so that can often put his opponents at a bit of a disadvantage early, and he does start well against a lot of fighters. He gets them down, even against Mansour Abdelmalik. He was able to get the takedowns, and it was only until he tired out that Mansour was able to finish him. Outside of that, yes, Penis knocked him out early. You can knock him out early if you land a big shot. So it's a very interesting fight for me, I think I have to pick Wes Schultz just based on we don't know the level of Ben Johnston's skill set. Like, he looks pretty good. He's well-rounded. Muay Thai world champion, training partner for Izzy Adesanya in the striking level. And then on top of that, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, where most of his wins have been submission. Like, he looks good, right? But at the end of the day, never fought any fighters that have been really good in MMA. Hasn't fought the level of competition that Wes Schultz has fought, even though Wes hasn't beaten high-level fighters really. He still has fought better fighters than Ben Johnston. He has the UFC experience. He does have a very strange skill set that is not easy to prepare for, whereas Ben Johnston is a little bit more traditional in his striking skill set. A lot of fighters fight like Ben Johnston. Not a lot of fighters fight like Wes Schultz. And ultimately, the biggest red flag here is the fact that Ben Johnston was retired, was off for 2 years, speaks openly about not being 100%, speaks openly about having shoulder surgery and panicking a little bit when he got the call, because he's like, damn, I'm not even ready. I haven't been fighting for 2 years. How can I fight? So yeah, I think you have to pick Wes Schultz here, but I'm not confident that Ben Johnston doesn't come out here and put a clinic on him, because he seems to have decent takedown defense. He's got better striking and he's competent on the ground, so of course Ben can win the fight stylistically, but everything else, all the intangibles are in the favor of Wes Schultz here. And as I always say, boys, there's only 3 ways to break down a fight: stylistics, intangibles, and statistics, right? There's the only 3 things you need to break down a fight. And the stylistics here are very even. You could even lean to Ben Johnston being a better stylistic fighter, more martial arts skills. In my opinion, he does, right? Even better cardio and stuff like that. But the intangibles are all on the side of Wes Schultz here, and that's what leans me to pick him. Whereas if Ben was fighting for a couple of years and, he had more high-level experience, I'd seen him battle back from university, he was not retired, I'd probably be picking Ben. But that's not the time we're in, so I'm picking Wes Schultz to win this fight. And ultimately, I'll pick him to win the fight via submission. So that's it, boys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Click subscribe if you did, and you will see me break down next week's card. And we have Freedom UFC 250 at the White House coming up in not too long, and I cannot wait to break that one down for you. Might have a special video on the way breaking down that card for you. Outside of that, I'll see you in the next one, boys. Peace and love.